Well, my challenge as we move into the second half of what we wanted to share with you guys today, oftentimes we come to these conferences, we get this sugar high, right? We leave inspired, we write a couple things down, and then 2 or 3 months from now, you're the exact same person. Now, I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realistic optimist. And my reality says 6 months from now, the majority of you will have done nothing with some of the things you heard today. I don't mean to be harsh with that, but that's what facts tell us. Here's where I want to go for the next few minutes and invite you guys to walk with us, because how do we go beyond the sugar high and actually implementing it into our lives, into our workplaces? It has to go beyond just desiring it. We have to demand it. My personal journey of what happened in my life to help me get over that hump to say something different has to change. I remember the day very vividly. At the time, it was a couple years ago, May 26th, which happened to be my wife's birthday. And at the time, I was working for a well-known Fortune 500 company here in town, working about 55, 60 hours a week. And on what should have been a beautiful spring day in May, weather was nice, sun was out, I was pulling into my driveway. My garage went up, and then I parked my car, and I just couldn't go inside yet. The reason being, it felt like there was 1,000 pounds of pressure waiting on my head in this moment of all the things going on. And it wasn't so much the amount of hours I was putting in, because up until that point, I had built the mentality of working hard and grinding. I worked probably 5 to 5. And I was okay with that, because that's what you do when you wanted to climb the corporate ladder. And I was okay with that part of it. But what wasn't sitting well with me was the lack of investment being made back into me by my employer, or the value that I brought to the table in trying to change the culture. And as I sat there in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel and thinking, I asked myself the question, what am I about to bring into my household? What am I about to bring into my household? Now, see, a lot of you, I'm sure, we do these workshops and we ask people to describe on an average day, who do you go home to and what type of activities do you engage in? And then we ask people to contrast good day versus bad day, and then they share what's that difference between a good day and a bad day. And without fail, there's always 1 or 2 people that say, well, there's not much difference between a good day and bad day because I don't bring that into my household. And I would have said I would have been in that boat and raised my hand to say I had a great process that my wife and my children didn't need to know what kind of day that I had. But it was in that moment of honesty I had to be honest with this question or this statement. We take home more than a paycheck. Every couple of weeks, there's a financial investment put into your bank account for the work that you did. But every single day, we're taking home more than a paycheck. And in that moment of honesty, I got my phone out and I said, I'm gonna make a quick video to capture the moment, to capture the emotion of what I'm feeling right now, because I don't wanna lose that. And I began to challenge myself with this question. Am I gonna walk into these doors the best husband that I can be? Anyone, show of hands real quick, how many of you are married in the room? How many people are married, right? Big majority. We know marriage is the easiest thing we've ever done, right? Not so much. We know statistically, right, 50% of divorces or marriages end in divorce, with probably another 40 to 45% of people living in less than desirable marriages. We know marriage is hard when you have all the distractions that are happening in the world, all the kids' activities, etc. We know marriage is hard. And therefore, you need to go home with as much energy as possible to have a chance at a successful marriage. Now, I gauge to say, every single person in the room, when you sat at the altar and you were standing across from your spouse and you were holding hands, gazing into their eyes, what you didn't say was, man, I can't wait to give you the best 63% of me. Probably didn't happen, right? And what I challenged myself in that moment, I said, what am I gonna bring in the household as a dad to my beautiful little girls? You know, there's still, a couple of them are still in the age where they're excited, you know, when they still get excited when you get home. And I had lied to myself and I said, again, I wasn't negative, but there were days I came home and not today. Dad doesn't have it. And they deserve the best version of me to want to go in and engage with them, wrestle with them, right? Play with them. Because one thing I can guarantee every parent in this room, none of you sat there in the hospital room holding your baby and said, man, I can't wait to give you the best 73% that I got. They're worth so much more than that. Then I said, I deserve to be the best version of me that I can be so I can be the influence that I'm supposed to be in the world around me. Now, the reality, that wasn't going to be handed to me. It wasn't just going to happen. How was I going to get there? I had to demand more. Now, I want to do a quick exercise again real quick. Let's get back into your same partners that we had earlier, or the same threes. And we're going to answer 4 quick questions. 4 quick questions. We're going to take a quick 3 minutes. Actually, before we do that, let's step back real quick. Let's ask this question, because we need to answer this first. Who is the greatest justifier of all time? Say in the back. We are, right? The greatest justifier of all time is ourselves. We justify, right? We justify. Especially here in the Midwest, there's something about us in the Midwest. We're built for long suffering. Right? As we enter the fall season, we start to complain about the weather, and we have heated steering wheels and automatic car starters. You think about 100 years ago, what did it take to live in South Dakota 100 years ago? Long suffering, where you just had to deal with it, right? And when we think about that, we justify where we are. We justify where we are. Here's the reality, ladies and gentlemen. The reality is we're surrounded by the majority of people living in social conformity. Let's prove this point real quick. Show of hands, complete honesty. How many people in the room today would trade places with their parents, full scale, their job, their career, their happiness, their vacations? How many people, show of hands, how many people would trade places with their parents and walk the same path? No takers? Usually there's a few people, but again, most of us would say no, because we saw the impacts that our parents had. When we ask the question, how many people know at least 3 people, friends, family, or coworkers, where you know intimately the parts of their life where you would say, I would trade places with that person and want their life? Oftentimes there's maybe 1 or 2. Maybe 1 or 2. So if we didn't come from environments where we saw what was possible and believed more was possible, and amongst all of our coworkers, all of our friends, all of our family, we failed to have even 3 people that we would say, I want to trade places with their lives, we're lacking in abundance the example that it's possible. And so the result is this. The majority of us are living in social conformity. We've learned to conform to these realities. So here's the questions I want to get to. So back in your tables, 4 quick questions. On an average day, what percentage do you feel like you go home with? If you were to give it a percentage, and I don't care if you love your job, no one goes home at 100%, right? There's some level of energy you expounded during the day. On an average day, what percentage of energy do you feel like you take home to your family? Number 2, what would you do if you had 1 extra day a month? If you were given 1 extra day a month where you actually went home at 85% versus 60%, where you had that extra energy to do something and go out and do something, what would you do with that time? Number 3, how much would you pay for that 1 day, right? So put that in perspective of a family of 4, what does it cost to go out to dinner and go to the movies, right? $100 probably or so. Probably add a kidney in there if you want popcorn. Right? But what would you pay for that day? And then last, how would you return to work the next day if you went home at 85%? How would you return to work the next day if you went home at 85 versus 60%? So a quick 3 minutes, get back into your pairs or into your threes, discuss those quick 4 questions. 3 minutes, we're gonna come back together and go. All right, so I'm sure the dialogue gets us to a place of saying we all know that more is possible than what we have today. So I want to give you guys a couple quick steps, a couple things to think about of how can we start to influence the world around us. So the 3 Ds of a healthy and productive organizational culture is professional, potential, and personal. Those are the 3 Ds, thus the Think 3D. Now there's 3 Ds in moving this thing forward and advancing your culture, no matter whether you're an individual contributor or whether you're a business. And the first D is demand more of yourself. Demand more of yourself. Now, here's a question. And there's no right or wrong answers based off perspective. What would you say is the greatest leadership challenge we face today? Greatest leadership challenge we face today? Trying to balance. What else? Honesty, empathy. What else? Turnover. What else? Time, right? Again, there's no really right or wrong answer, but from my perspective, what the greatest leadership challenge we have today and has always been is the inability to effectively lead ourselves. The inability to effectively lead ourselves. If I asked every person in the room in here who's capable of more, I would see every hand go up because we know more is possible. And this is the reason why we have this great starting point of demanding more of ourselves, because we often get frustrated when other people aren't meeting our expectations and leaders aren't doing this and people in these organizations aren't doing that. And it's not to say that we shouldn't have those expectations of CEOs and shouldn't have those expectations of our government, but it has to start with ourselves. Now, as we said earlier, John C. Maxwell talked about leadership is influence. Show of hands in the room, how many of you have the ability to influence somebody? Every single person in here, right? So that means we all have the potential to be a leader. Now, here's something else about leadership. Leaders go first. Leaders go first. And what this does, when we go first and we said, I'm determined to demand more of me and what I'm capable of, it takes back the power of outsourcing our happiness to somebody else. Of outsourcing our happiness to somebody else. Too many people have given that away. We always ask this question, how many people deserve to be happy? And we'll see every single hand in the room go up. Then we follow that up with, how many people expect to be happy? Amazingly, only around 40% of people actually expect to be happy. And the reason being, they've outsourced the responsibility of their happiness, their spouse, their job, their children, external circumstances. If those things would just change, then I would be happy. And we're lying to ourselves if we're sitting there waiting for that to happen. Now, step number 1, what I want you to do is think about an ideal workplace culture. What is the culture that you would want to retire in? And make a list of maybe 10 to 20 things that would comprise that culture. Things like fun, engaging, good communication, empathy, positive attitude, right? Come up with a list of your ideal culture that you would want to work at for the rest of your career. Then ask yourself this one question. What are 1 or 2 attributes of this good culture from your perspective that you can adopt to help move forward? What are 1 or 2 of those attributes that you have control over that you can help move forward in your organization? And then second to that, ask yourself, over the next 6 months, how will you work to improve this within your workspace? It has to start with us. I saw the power and the benefit of this when I was a frontline collector. And I had no title, no position, but I realized as I invested in myself, my influence began to grow and I started to impact my teammates around me. And then pretty soon, by impacting the team around me, my team got better and became more positive. And when my team became more positive, we began to influence other teams around us. And I started to grow my circle of influence simply by starting with myself. Now, the second D is demand more of others. Demand more of others. So when you think about that, think about your workspace, and who are 2 or 3 people that you would like to influence or impact of how they go home every day? Who's a few people that you can go to when you talk about CultureCon, and you say there were some really great speakers, and then there was these guys, Think 3D, that was talking about some crazy things. But something stood out and said, I know more is possible. And find 2 or 3 people that would say, you know what? I think that would be a great thing. As Vonnie had said earlier, you need to start to build a team, or as I say, build a coalition. 1 is the only number you need to make a spark, but you need multiple people to get momentum. And then from there, what I want you to do, create a plan, hold each other accountable over the next 6 to 9 months, and say, what can we do? Grab a couple of more of those attributes from that ideal culture and say, what can we do to begin to move this thing forward? Here's the thing, friends. Culture is a team sport. It's a team sport. Now I want to pause here real quick before we go into the last D, which is demand up. And I want you to notice something that we did intentionally. We didn't say, expect this and go to your boss tomorrow or next week, demand up. We said 6 months for yourself, 6 to 9 months with those you work with. The reason it takes time, and I know this from personal experience, and every person who is in a leadership role can probably attest to this, that you don't always know what's on your leader's plate until you actually get in that role. We don't always know what's on their plates, so we have to have a level of patience. And again, if we can't start with ourselves and say, here's what I'm willing to do and what I'm willing to contribute to this organization, how can we go to others and demand it of them if we haven't demanded of ourselves? Now I want to go a layer deep before we go to this last D, because this was the thing that I had to get honest with that really pushed me over the edge and say, not only was more possible and more than I just desired it, but how I was going to demand it. So much of what we talk about here today makes a lot of sense. The numbers are there. It makes a lot of sense. We all would agree that this stuff actually would impact. This is head knowledge. But again, we are the greatest justifiers of all time, ourselves. And so we'll justify and just deal with these different things unless we get deeper in our why. Now, my why was right here. These are my beautiful 3 girls and my beautiful wife. And I had to get honest, even though I was equipped to deal with that, and I was okay working 55, 60 hours a week, I had to be honest of what that was doing to them. Now, I want you guys to do me a favor real quick, friends. I want everyone to get out your cell phone really quick. Get your cell phone out around the room. Now, I want you to go into your pictures and find at least one picture that represents part of your why. If there's something that you love, someone you love, something you love to do, find that picture. And once you find it, I want you to go ahead and hold your cell phone up in the air. Everyone got it? Get it up in the air, get it up in the air. Once you got it, let me see it in the air, let's see it in the air. I want you guys to look around the room real quick. These are the things that we love. These are our whys. And right now, this room is being illuminated by people that need us to be the light into their lives. The room is being illuminated by people that need us to be the best versions of who we can be to show them that it's possible. So as we think about this, friends, are we going to go beyond just desiring it? We have to start demanding it. By our own admission, all of us had said none of us wanted to walk the path that our parents took. And the question I want to give to you is, are we living a life of just accepting it to where our children says, I don't want that life that my parents had, because we've just accepted it and we just did what we had to do? Well, guess what our parents did? They did what they had to do when more is actually possible. Now, once you've done these things and you got your why, you said, I'm firm, I'm going to make sure that 6 months from today, if I run into these guys, I'm not going to be the same person. Once you have that determination and you have your plan of what you're going to do over the next 6 months to become a greater light within your workspace, and then you've locked arms with 2 or 3 people around you and you said, we're going to determine to change our workspace and our culture because we can influence at least something. Now what you can do is bring a value proposition. But before that, here's the thing as parents, right? Once you know better, it is our responsibility to do better. Any good parent wants to provide a better life for their children than they had. Is that a true statement? Right? We want to provide a better environment than what we grew up in. And once we know better, it's our responsibility to do better. Right? So now when we bring these things to our organization and we build a value proposition, we say, I didn't come to you 6 months ago because I had to be honest about what I was bringing to the table. But over the last 6 months, here's the things that I've been doing, and I got with John and Susie, and we started impacting the world around us. And now you're bringing a value proposition to your employer and say, what would happen if this crazy idea, you jumped in the boat with us and we started rowing together towards this thing called culture? What would happen? We need to start changing the dynamics of employer-employee relationships. In the 21st century, it has to go beyond just having a job. Healthy relationships are based in a genuine care about the health and well-being of the other party. Far beyond that. The question has to be not what can we do, but what will we do? And I don't care if you're in the room and you're just an employee, and if I asked you to rate your culture on a scale of 1 to 10, and you say, today my culture's a 3, this place sucks. The question I would ask you is, what are you doing to make it a 3.5? Because every single person in here has the ability to influence at least a half a point to their culture. What are you doing to make it a better space? And as an employer, culture is the new currency. Culture is the new currency. We hear a lot of talk about money. They've done countless studies where leaders think that 89% of people actually leave because of money when only 12% actually do. It comes down to how we're treating people. See, as a business, I can choose to pay more than my competitor, but is that a competitive advantage? No. My competitor can choose tomorrow to change how much they pay. But what if as a business you were here and you say, you know what, this makes some sense, and I think we want to explore this. And over the next year, you are intentional about investing in your culture. And then your competitor finds out and they want to do the same thing. This is a competitive advantage, as John was talking about, because the reality is they can't go to Office Max and just buy new culture, right? I don't care how great Amazon is, they cannot prime it to you in 2 days, right? It takes as long as it takes. Culture is the new currency. And I want to leave you with this thought, because the reality is the greatest impediment to great is good. The reason so many businesses aren't doubling down and making the investment into culture because it's hard and it's tangible to quantify it oftentimes. It's, as Vanya said, there's feelings and it's not black and white. But the reality is the investment is always worth it. Even the best people in the world at what they do, whether it's Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, one thing they all have in common, they have coaches. They have coaches, whether it's an acting coach, a nutrition coach. They have people who are expert in what they do. And in the 21st century, every single person knows what it takes to be successful is intense focus at being good at what you do. And it's great that we've gotten to a space where people are starting to get into culture committees, right? But if I could be honest, that in the long term is not enough. Businesses don't have sales committees. They don't have accounting committees, because those things are important to the overall health and well-being. They have departments and specific positions. Can you guys tell me one part of your business that would not be positively impacted by a better culture? Better culture is better for everybody. And I know Vani was a little subtle with it earlier of how do you get there, but whether it's with Think 3D or somebody else, culture is a very specific thing, and businesses need to be taking a look at how do we get culture coaches to help us get to where we want to go. Because again, if you have someone in a full-time role and they spend 1 hour a month planning picnics and beer Fridays, It's not going to get you there. It's not going to get you there. And I want to leave you with this thought. If I were to ask you to describe the working conditions of, let's say, China and India, what are some of the things that come to mind? Throw them out there. Sweatshops. What else? Long hours, right? Where they don't really care about their people, right? Low pay. I would guess there's not a mass exodus of people eager to go work in China or India. And so when you think about these two countries, and I were to tell you that they're of the developed nations of 300 million people or more, they are the number one and number two most depressed nations on the planet. No one would be surprised by that. Is that fair to say? Well, I'm going to give you one guess who's number three. We are. And let's go back to that justification. When you talk about the average working professional spends somewhere between 50 and 75% of their waking hours at work, going to work, talking about work, thinking about work, decompressing from work. There's no other bucket of your life that is impacted more than the workspace. And as employers, we have some level of responsibility of what we're sending our employees home with. And it has to be more than just a paycheck. So I want to leave you with this one question. What would happen if we genuinely set out to invest in our people to make them a better person? Again, friends, we have choices, but it's not going to just happen. In this thing that we call the human experience, are we accepting it or are we creating it? And lastly, it's time that we do more than just desire it. We have to demand it. And as individuals, above all else, we have to dare to be great. Thank you.